In this tutorial, we'll add automated mixing to our sequence. Before the automation will be read, we need to enable it in each track. So I'm going to begin by opening the mixing board. I'll make sure that all my tracks are visible. And for each track, I'm going to click the automation play button. This is different than the play button in the controls window here, in that this allows us to play back volume and panning instructions, whereas this playback has us played note data, audio files, etc. So I'm going to enable the automation playback in all my tracks. At this point, there isn't any automation data in any of my tracks, and it's a good idea to put an initial volume and panning instruction in every track, even if you don't plan on having the track volume or panning change through the course of your sequence. This is so that when you save your sequence and reopen it or load it on another computer, the volume and panning that you want will reappear the way you left it. So I'm going to close the mixing board, and we'll go through two ways you can add this initial volume and panning instruction. One way is to do it via the event list. So I'm going to highlight one of my tracks, click on the event list, and you simply have to add volume or panning instructions. Click the value for controller, click the plus sign. I'm going to put it in measure 1, beat 2. That gives a little pre-roll to get the instruction there, but it's before the first note sounds. And I'll start with controller number 7. That's the controller for volume. I'll give it a value, maybe 100. I'll do the same thing for panning. Click the plus. Same location's okay. I'll choose controller number 10. That's for panning. And let's give it a value of 20. That'll pan it probably over to the left somewhat. So now we have these two values. Open my mixing board again. And we can watch this, just this fader. When I click play, this fader should jump to those positions on beat 2. And there it goes. Now it's panned pretty far to the left, and the volume is slightly down from full volume. The other way you can achieve this initial setting is to do a snapshot. And this is a great way to add these events if you have a lot of tracks, so you don't have to go to each event list and press insert for each value. So again, I'm going to show all my tracks. I'll go back to my main tracks window. I'm going to highlight all of the tracks, and I'm going to choose the location where I want this snapshot to happen in the counters window. And if I go under region, it says take automation snapshot. That will read everything that's set in the mixing board here and put a value in each one of the tracks for that. So I'm going to kind of play around with the values here. This is probably not the way I want my piece to be mixed, but for the sake of this tutorial, it'll give us a visual of how this works. So I've added some values here. Check my counter at beat 2 of measure 1, make sure all my tracks are highlighted, go to the region menu, take automation snapshot. It'll ask a few questions or give you a few choices. Since we're just putting one value that'll last through our whole piece, we could say all time selected tracks. That means the tracks that are highlighted. And all enabled data types, that's what's showing in the mixing board, volume and panning, and also the mute button. Press OK, and you'll see there's a new instruction in all the tracks. If I check that out in the event list, I'll see it's a volume, a panning, and a MIDI track mute, which is at this time unmuted. Okay, let's see if this all actually worked out. I'm going to change the values around. Let's rewind while I do this. change my panning to something different than the snapshot. Okay, and when I press play, once it passes through beat 2 of measure 1, we should see all of these switch. Let's check it out. And there they all switched. Alright, let's just double check this automation play enable. If I uncheck these, maybe I'll just do a few of them, and I change these values. Remember last time we pressed play, we saw that these values jumped to the settings that we put in the snapshot. So I'll press play and see if you can think what's going to happen once I press play. What's going to be different about these fader movements versus these over here where the automation is disabled. And I press play. Notice that the ones where the automation was enabled, they jumped to their position. These were left alone. So being able to play and disable, if you will, the automation is really useful when you're testing out your mix. You can put some volume values in. Let's say you play it with the automation and the volume is too low in one of your tracks. You can temporarily disable it, turn up the volume, see if that works better, and then re-record that instruction. You don't have to erase your track or do anything like that. You just disable and enable the playback of that data. Alright, let's add some automation. I have a melody in the synth string track here beginning in measure 4, and I'd like to give it some more realistic phrasing, kind of like if a musician was playing it and they gradually fade in to the middle of the phrase and then fade out near the end. So I'm going to use real-time automation recording to make that happen. Since this tutorial only covers MIDI automation, not audio automation, I've disabled all the instrument tracks and left only the MIDI track automation on. Okay, so I'll begin by record enabling automation on this track that will record the movements that I do to this fader. Since it's in latch mode, it won't record any instructions until I actually grab and move the fader, and once I've moved it, it won't add any new instructions until I move it a second time. Also good to know, if I record my fader motions and I'm not happy with the volume that I get, I can rewind, record again, and it'll just erase over the original instructions without erasing notes. Be very careful not to press this record button when recording automation. This will erase everything in the track. Notes, patch changes, everything. When this button is depressed and you press play here, it will automatically go into automation record mode. We'll know that because we'll see this red button flash. Again, do not press this record button. It's a separate record button. Alright, let's play this from the beginning, and I'll just begin moving my fader. And if we look in this track, we see there's a bunch of stuff in there now. That's all the additional volume instructions. We can go to our event list, and you'll see there's a whole string of volume instructions there that we added. You can also check it out in the graphic editor. And if you look along the bottom, this is where the automation data lives. You can see there's a volume controller moving up and down. Okay, let's play back from there and check out this fader as it plays back. Next, I'll add a ping pong panning effect to my guitar track. So to do that, we'll use the graphic editor and we'll use one of our specialized tools over here. We'll actually use this button, which changes the shape or the flavor of what is drawn in. So I'll open up the graphic editor for guitar. You can already see there's some instructions along the bottom. That's my note on velocities. So it's this bottom section where all the volume, panning, controller data lies, note data lies up here. Okay, I'd like my ping pong panning effect to be in time. So I notice this box up here has a quarter note. This button means that the grid is enabled. So any effects that I add or any automation that I add that's going to be over time is going to be within these restrictions. So the effect I want to do is 16th notes. So I want it to change on every other note in my guitar part. So I'll choose 16th notes. Notice the grid becomes more defined. I'm going to go down here and choose what kind of automation I'll be inserting when I draw it in, and I want to choose controller number 10, panning. Select my pencil tool, and in the reshape flavor I'm going to actually choose a square, and the square will change then on every 16th note or whatever I've set in my grid. So I can start with a really low value for my panning, and if I draw across, you notice that I'm getting a change in panning on every beat. Alright, let's bring the mixing board in front of this or near it. I'm going to hide my other faders, and in fact I'll mute everything, or another way of saying it, I'll solo the guitar part, and we'll see how this fader and panning knob reacts to this information here. Let's get my windows organized a little bit. Put my play bar here. Now, I will say before I play this that with the advent of software synths and rewire and all that, MIDI automation sometimes isn't read properly by the sound module. So we may need to go back and actually do this panning on the instrument track, but let's see if it works this time around. So I can see that my panning knob was moving back and forth, but I didn't hear any change. So let's do the same process in an audio track. That's basically what this instrument track is an audio playthrough track, and see if it works better. This goes a little beyond the scope of Music 8A, and it's things that we'll cover more in 8B, automation in audio tracks. Slightly different, but basically the same. So let's get rid of this panning data here. And a quick way to do that, close up some windows here, is to go to that track, open the events list, and I see panning instructions in there. There they are. I could go and click on each one and get rid of them. That might take a little while, but a faster way is to go to the View filter. Under the Setup menu, it says Set View Filter. I'm going to go there, and I'm going to clear everything. I'm not erasing any notes, I'm just making them hidden. And I'm going to click Automation and Controllers, and Only, and I'll add the panning controller. And now if we go to our event list, for guitar, all we see is panning instructions. So it's really easy now to just highlight all of that, press delete, and it's gone. I haven't erased any notes, I've just hidden them temporarily. Go back to View Filter, say Set All, and you'll see my notes will come right back. So that's a quick and easy way to clear those. Alright, let's do the same type of automation, but in this instrument track. The drawing of it and everything will be the same. We'll just use a different window. So I'll enable automation here. And this time I'm going to open the sequence editor. And we can see in this editor some of the volume stuff I added to my synth string part. It's already there. We see some stuff with dashed lines and solid lines. The dashes means there's automation in there, but it's play disabled. In other words, this button is off. You can see that in the track up here. When I click that button, these lines turn to dashes. When I turn it on, they become solid. Okay, so I'll do the same process I did before. I'll go to my tools here, choose the pencil tool, make sure my reshape flavor is square wave, choose a 16th note, and let's make sure I know where my guitar part starts in measure 2, and I'll begin drawing right here in measure 2. Notice we get that same kind of up and down shape, just a slightly different window. Okay, let's bring this up to the front, play it from here, and bring this up, and we'll check out now this panning knob and see if we hear that effect. Okay, we're hearing some kind of effect, but it's not panning. So I didn't carefully choose what to draw in with my tool. So I just undid that. And notice that this window is a little different. On the graphic editor for MIDI, you go to the bottom to choose the type of instruction that's going to be drawn. In the sequence editor, you actually choose it from this left-hand side. So right now, volume is in the foreground. So I want to choose panning for the foreground. That'll help. And for insert, I want to choose pan. So you choose that on the left side. Let's try the same drawing again. There's our panning. Measure 8 should be okay. Now we should be in business. Let's see. Okay, that'll be a nice effect. The last thing I think I'll change before we hear all of this put together is I've got these control changes happening exactly on the beat. It's possible that the attack of the guitar might get a little bit clipped, or it might not quite pan over in time. So it might be good to make this panning just a couple ticks earlier than on the beat. I can use my view filter to help with that. So I'm going to first off select just this track, which is the instrument track for guitar. Open the event list. See my panning instructions there. I'm going to go to my setup, set view filter, and I'm going to clear everything again. It'll disappear. Choose audio pan. Now I'm just looking at the panning instructions. Okay, so I'm going to select everything in this track, and I'm going to take these values and I'm going to shift them earlier in time. So I can go under Edit, Shift, and just tell DP to play it earlier by just a little bit. Possibly just 5 out of the 240 ticks will be enough. Press that. They're all just slightly earlier. I'll have my view filter show everything again, so it's all back. Let's see how that sounds.